Right, come out and it's part 3. Just thought it was interesting to get this out again today. Now I don't know if you can see, I moved that little arm to where it was yesterday and you can see the pressure's moved. It's lower pressure. I should be reading it in millimetres of mercury. It's at 768, whereas yesterday was more like 771, so there's lower pressure than yesterday, so I'm going to move that up to where it's today. Temperature, well, it's dropped down to 3 degrees centigrade, so it's colder and therefore there's slightly denser air, but because there's lower pressure there's less dense air, so they may be counteracting each other with only the small changes. And the humidity has increased to 75%, so that is a tiny factor, but that will make it slightly better shooting conditions. So it's maybe overall tiny bit better shooting conditions than yesterday, even though it looks like a worse day. So, you know, it's a combination of these 3 factors as we discussed last time. Right, so put that away and back to the book. So, things to discuss. We're on to point of impact, or POI. Right, this can be hard to determine even with a spotting scope due to the lack of power a BB has at long range. If you are lucky, you will see a leaf or foliage move on a still day. You're right. Due to how high angle shots come in from, they cannot be tracked like normal flat shots, and even at the target you need to be looking for them coming out of the sky. So they're coming in very vertical, and obviously at maximum range they're coming in almost vertical. The spotter should concentrate on the target and area around it. This is difficult, and it's far more likely you will hear impact. So you'll just hear if they're actually hitting the solid target or if they're hitting foliage. To assist in determining miss locations, a 3 metre by 3 metre tarp is advised stretched at 45 degrees with bungees as a backstop. The target should be immediately in front of this backstop and ideally made of aluminium, such as the MOD figure 11 plates that are available at surplus. Right now I use these, they're sort of man size, what the military use to target, to train on. They have a man printed on them, charging you with a rifle. They're very lightweight, they're large enough, they're rigid enough, and because they're a thin plate, they actually make a really loud noise when they're shot, even at range. And this is the advantage of this: you will hear that you've hit. There's none of that. I need to look at a video or talk to someone down there. I'll go and look. You will hear the it's really loud, whereas a thicker plate's more of a dong. You know, that sound won't travel as far. So really advise those. Look around on surplus, eBay. You'll maybe get them for around maybe £30–40 if you're lucky. You'll only need one, or you could have a series down a range, which is what we do. Thin sheet metal is ideal as gives loudest sounds of hits. A large plastic bin or oil drum makes a good target too. So yeah, if you're stuck by a large plastic cheap bin, put it upside down. Reactive targets and backstops are important and make the task far more efficient and pleasurable, because you want to know what's happening down there. You don't want to just be shooting and wondering. That's not enjoyable in itself, and it doesn't help you collect any data. The point of impact may have so little power delivered to it that it may not well mark card or even paper properly. If in doubt, a human target is always a good choice, so give the spotter protection, iPro, and a radio. He will call his hit and that in itself shows that such hits are noticeable and possible in game. So this is it. You know, a lot of people say, oh, people won't feel them. It's like, you go down there, and if I shoot you, when I do hit you, you will notice I've hit you. There's no doubt about it, as long as you're stationary. So yeah, if people are running, yeah, no chance. It's such a minimal amount of energy. But if they're stationary, which is possible in game, a lot of people are either sentries or they just think they're out of range, especially when they group up. It's quite common, you see groups of people regrouping who sort of observe the engagement from distance and actually have a chat and think they're out of range. And that's the best target. I've shot quite a few people like that, because that group of people means it doesn't matter if you're not totally pinpoint accurate, you hit one of them, you've got a good chance of it. So, you know, don't go thinking that people won't feel the hits at these distances. That's a bit of a myth. Right. I mean, at any time there's always a chance that people won't feel the hits, but generally, if you're stood there, this hits you, you will notice, you know. Right, tracking BBs. When the shooter fires, there is no loud noise or recoil to induce a flinch, like there is with a real firearm. You know yourself, if you've ever done any shooting, the bang, the recoil, you know, all of that. It takes a little while to get used to that. This makes observation of the round's flight path far easier, and modern white heavyweights moving at slower speeds also assist this. On a regular setup, the pellets enter the bottom of the scope picture, rise up to the crosshair and then fall away again, eventually leaving the scope picture. Depending on optic quality, field of view, magnification, a shooter can follow a pellet out to around 120 plus yards. So yeah, in perfect conditions, good sunlight, dark background, you can see that white pellet just sailing out there and then maybe dropping away and still see it to a certain distance. Yeah. However, this is dictated by the background and light conditions. Nice dark backgrounds make it easy to see white pellets' trajectory. However, at extreme ranges, the pellets are being fired more into the brighter sky and become impossible to track to the target. This is why extreme range shooting is more about observation and feedback than the actual pellets being watched to target. So this is the thing, is, you know, you get used to normal airsoft shooting where it is a very visual, far more than say any other shooting really. You don't see where, say, air pellets are going. You don't see where actual live rounds are going other than impact. Whereas with airsoft, it's like every round's an actual tracer round from muzzle to impact. If you can actually see it, it's much brighter and slower moving. The spotter is more useful than visual tracking, as are reactive backstops or targets, yet in the field you will have little to no feedback. How then can you be expected to hit the target? Well, that's the whole point of this book, to gather enough data to predict where the pellet will go in that situation. So this is it, in game, I see a guy down there 145 yards, firing rounds. He ain't going to tell me where the misses are. You're just going to get him to either react or be hit. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, just firing at him and making him react and feel that he's vulnerable is actually a psychological tool. He'd have no clue where I was if I was laid here. He'd just wonder if someone's in that field, you know, or how is someone really shooting at me. So he'd feel vulnerable, and vulnerable enough to certainly not want to come into this field. He'd be more feeling vulnerable in the tree line. But yeah, this book that I'm reading from is a book I published a couple of years ago, and the book, it's like a very thick material. That the covers are basically the same as each page, so it's waterproof, it's ring bound, and it's a field book. You take it with you in your gun bag. Whenever you go shooting, you fill it out, you write in things such as the pressures, the wind speeds, as we'll discuss, all these kind of things. And you can see on the front you write what rifle it is that it's for, and basically it's like a logbook. You're writing how many rounds you've used, you're writing all the shoots, you're writing, you know, like here there's all chronograph readings, you know, it's a logbook. and you use this to make range cards at the back from filling out a huge chunk of this book, and there's data cards. But at the beginning there's a thesis all about everything that I've learned that I'm trying to pass on to you, and that's what these videos are about. So moving back, the last thing we'll touch on today, groupings. Right, so due to the inferior attributes of airsoft compared to other more serious shooting sports, the groupings are far larger. Right, these guns just aren't. The smooth bores, you know, firing a much slower moving, super lightweight pellet, and therefore, you know, nowhere near as consistent or accurate. A grouping is a series of shots impact upon or around a target, measuring the two impacts furthest apart from each other, not the target, determines the platform and shooter's group. The smaller the group, the more accurate the shooter is. It is good to shoot 3 or 5 round groups, where in firearms shooting groups may be inches wide. An airsoft group is likely to be feet and yards. Only after a while should you start to measure groups in an effort to document improvements in your own platform and skills. Obviously wind has a large effect on groupings, not just shooter and gun. So it's something that you do more seriously once you've got into this a little bit. You start to measure groups where you go, I'm just going to fire 5 rounds at that target. It doesn't matter if they hit the target or not, it's just the distance between the two furthest impacts. And then you document that, and then you can see if you can slowly improve that, or you can compare that with other people who are going to this kind of level. So, go on a little bit more. Distances. Ranges to target are measured in yards or meters. Some shooters use meters, however, as ranges are short, airsoft lends itself better to yards. They're shorter distances, there's more increments over that smaller area as I've discussed. And rangefinders do meters or yards. The difference is approximately 9% shorter than a metre. This makes it easy to compare ranges in your head or on the fly. Some people just use 10% as a quick rule of thumb, therefore 100 yards is 91 metres and 91 metres equals 100 yards. Make a note of what other shooters use, as 9% is a huge difference at long range, because if they're saying, oh yeah, I can hit something at 150 metres, but it turns out it's yards, well, it's actually more like 136 metres, so it's a big difference, nearly 10%. Okay, make a note of what other shooters use. There is another unit you should familiarise yourself with, known as the airsoft meter, BS. This is the most common unit used in the sport to give data on a shooter's platform, e.g. my M4 can hit a head-sized target 10 out of 10 shots at 70 airsoft metres. We've all heard it, haven't we? It is important to not use airsoft meters yourself, as will defeat all of the calculations you make due to having an error of up to 79%. Okay, this is it. It's just a made-up number, is airsoft meters, in the sense of you need to be using something like, the minimum you need to be using something like Google Earth or tape measures even, or at least pacing something if you can't use a laser rangefinder. But just guessing, well, airsoft meters. Airsoft meters are never measured and often judged by experienced ex-special forces airsoft snipers. We've all met them. In order to avoid using airsoft meters, employ one of the techniques below to measure range. So pacing, Google Earth, laser rangefinder, telescopic sight. We'll look at that tomorrow. Thanks for joining me. Let's see what the weather's going to do then. And I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to, learn more, join the page. Ask any questions you want. Thanks for joining me. See you tomorrow.